They say time heals everything. But as I stood outside a banquet hall in suburban Illinois, 34 years old and clutching a birthday gift, I realized some wounds never close. They just learn how to hide better, the scent of catered food wafted through the glass doors. Inside, I could hear music, laughter, the kind of warmth that was once mine. I hadn't seen my family in over a year, but this is my mother's 60th birthday, was supposed to be the olive branch. My peace offering instead, my father stood in the doorway like a sentinel. "You're not on the list," he said, not "hi." Not "Julian, what a surprise." Just those 5 icy words. The kind that don't hurt right away, but settle into your chest and freeze something inside you. Behind him, my sister Marissa caught my eye. That smirk. She didn't even pretend to look surprised. I looked down at the gift in my hand, a leather-bound photo album filled with pictures of Mom and me from a different lifetime, and realized I was the only one hoping this night would fix anything. Growing up in Wheaton, Illinois, the house was always too small for the egos inside it. Marissa was the oldest, the brilliant one. Top of her class. Played violin at Carnegie Hall at 15. She even had her own shelf for awards. In the family room, Evan was the youngest, the baby who could do no wrong. Even when he totaled Dad's car, it was chalked up to youthful energy. And me? I was the middle child. The space between two extremes. The blurry face in family photos. The one who always tried too hard, except with Mom. She used to make me feel seen. I remember when I was 7 and came home crying because Melissa Brady didn't invite me to her party. Dad dismissed me with, "Can't expect everyone to like you." But Mom? She pulled out streamers, made cupcakes, and threw a party just for the two of us. "You're special in your own way, Julian," she whispered as we danced in the kitchen. Never forget that. Those words were gospel to me. When I won 3rd place in the science fair with my solar system model, I knew it wasn't first. Not like Marissa always managed. But Mom still framed the certificate and taped it right next to Marissa's awards. "It's not about being the best," she told me. "It's about doing your best." 3 days later, Dad took it down. "It clutters the wall," he muttered. I found it weeks later in Mom's bedside drawer, carefully folded. Proof that someone in the house still thought I mattered. When my 16th birthday party fell apart, friends ditching me for someone cooler, Mom didn't make me feel like a pity case. She dressed up, drove us 2 hours to Chicago to see a musical I'd been dying to watch, and treated me to dinner downtown. "Sometimes," she said, holding my hand across the table, "it's the quality of the company that counts. Not the quantity." I held onto those moments like life rafts. Because with Marissa's spotlight and Evan's charm, I needed someone, anyone, to believe I belonged. When I told my parents I was going to Boston University, the reaction was silence. "You don't want to stay close to home?" Mom asked gently. Dad was less gentle. "What, Chicago not good enough for you?" But I needed the space. I needed to know who I was when I wasn't Julian, the leftover sibling in Boston. I came alive. I graduated top of my class, landed a job in tech, and worked my way up to director of operations at Halcyon Labs. I led teams, traveled globally, managed multi-million-dollar budgets. Meanwhile, Marissa stayed in Illinois, working with Dad at his insurance agency. Evan floated between jobs, never really sticking to anything longer than a few months, but none of that mattered at home. At family dinners, Dad would still ask, "So you still at the computer company?" I sent gift baskets with Halcyon's logo every year. Not once did anyone mention them. Instead, the only questions were, "You seeing anyone? When are you going to settle down? You know your mother wants grandkids." Never mind that Marissa had no kids either. Or that Evan couldn't commit to a fish, let alone a person. 3 years ago, I flew home for Thanksgiving. I hoped it'd be different. That maybe, this time, they'd ask about my life instead of picking it apart. Marissa had too much wine and found me alone in the kitchen. "You think you're better than us?" she hissed. "Just because you live in Boston and make fancy money." "I never said that," I replied, slicing the pie with shaky hands. "I just want to be respected. That's all." "You left," she snapped. "You don't have to deal with moms." Health scares or dad's temper. You send gifts and think that counts. I call every week, I reminded her. I invite you all to visit. She slammed the pie knife down. You're not a real son. You're a postcard. Those words hit me like a slap that night. Mom's tone shifted. Calls became shorter. Then less frequent. Eventually, they stopped. I started to feel like I'd imagined all those moments we shared. Like maybe they were only ever real to me. Evan stopped responding to my texts. Dad barely spoke when I called. Mom, when she did answer, sounded distant. Like someone had rewritten the script in her mind. Marissa says you're too busy for us, she said once. Is that what she told you? I asked. There was a long pause. Is it true? I realized it didn't matter what I said. The story had already been written, and I was cast as the selfish, absent son. I was the villain in a play I never auditioned for. When I heard about Mom's 60th, I wrestled with myself. Do I show up? Do I risk being turned away? I decided to try out. I flew in. Bought a gift. Got a haircut. Practiced what I'd say if Mom looked me in the eyes and said, I'm glad you came. Instead, my father looked through me. You're not on the list. But, you weren't invited. Inside, I heard music. Clapping. Someone singing, Happy Birthday. I saw Marissa, radiant in blue silk, raising a toast, and I stood there on the sidewalk, like someone trying to crash a stranger's wedding. I left the gift on a bench and walked away. On the flight back, I didn't cry right away. It hit me somewhere over Pennsylvania. A sharp grief that had nothing to do with the party and everything to do with realizing I wasn't just excluded. I'd been erased. Mom had been my anchor once. But people change. And love, when filtered through enough resentment, can turn into something unrecognizable. I looked out the window, the lights of the city blinking below, and made a decision. I wasn't going to beg to be included anymore. Back in Boston, I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited people over. Not for any reason. Just because. Colleagues. Neighbors. My friend Malik from college. Rachel, my next-door neighbor who shares dog treats with Milo. We cooked dinner. Laughed until midnight, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. They saw me for who I was, not the middle child, or the career-obsessed son. Just Julian. It was the kind of evening that reminds you. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who show up when they don't have to. A month after Mom's party, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of the photo album. No caption, just the cover, slightly wrinkled from the wind that night, sitting on someone's kitchen table. Was it Marissa? Evan, or maybe Mom found it after all. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because part of me was still in there. Still remembered, and even if they never say the words out loud, I'm sorry, you were missed. You mattered. I'll carry those memories like armor, because I finally understand something no one ever told me as a child. You don't have to shrink to be loved, you don't have to sacrifice your peace to earn someone's approval, and you definitely don't have to keep knocking on a door that was never meant to open again. I stopped checking my phone every morning. That may not sound like much, but for someone who used to wake up hoping for a text from Mom, or even just a passive-aggressive meme from Marissa, it was progress. Instead, I made coffee, walked Milo along the harbor, and listened to the world wake up without me trying to force my place in it. It was strange how peaceful it felt. No calendar reminders for birthdays that would go ignored. No desperate urge to prove I was doing well. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to be enough. I was just being, and that was more than enough. There's a kind of grief that has nothing to do with death. It's the grief of letting go of who you hoped someone would be. I had to mourn the version of my mother I'd held in my head, the one who kept my science fair ribbon, who made paper party hats when I was 7. I had to accept that she'd changed. Or maybe I just never noticed who she really was when I was younger, and I had to admit something even harder, that deep down, I still wanted her to choose me. Some nights, I draft messages I never sent. Mom, do you remember when you took me to that musical in the city? I still think about it. I know we don't talk much anymore, but I hope you're okay. I miss you. Then I'd delete them. Because sometimes silence is louder than words. And sometimes, that silence protects you. 2 months after the party, I got an email, subject, wedding invitation from, Avani stared at the screen for a long time. Thought he was getting married to someone I didn't even know he was dating. The email was formal. No, hey, Jules, or, how have you been? Just the details, location, date, RSVP link. I hovered over the decline button, but I didn't click it, not yet. The weekend before Evan's wedding, I visited my old apartment storage unit to sort through boxes I hadn't touched since moving. In one of them, tucked between old college notebooks and birthday cards, was a letter to IT. Was in Mom's handwriting. Julian, for when you need to remember who you are. There was no date, no return address. Just pages filled with thoughts she'd never said aloud. She wrote about the musical, about the science fair, about how proud she was when I moved to Boston. I know we don't say it much, but you shine, even when we forget to look. I sat on the floor and wept. Not just because of what the letter said, but because it meant there was still a version of her, somewhere, who did see me, who hadn't fully disappeared. I went, not for Evan, not for Marissa, not even for Mom. I went for me. I wore a charcoal gray suit and brought no expectations. When I arrived, heads turned. Evan nodded once across the aisle. That was our greeting. Marissa gave me a double take, then looked away at Mom. She looked older, smaller. But when our eyes met, something flickered. Recognition, maybe. Regret. Or something even harder to name. During the reception, I didn't force conversation. I didn't try to fix anything. I danced once, with the bride's aunt, and spent most of the night on the patio with a glass of wine, and just before I left, Mom touched my arm. You came, she said softly. I always did, I replied. She blinked, then nodded, and that was it. Not an apology, not a grand reconciliation, but it was more than silence. Back in Boston, I did something radical. I started journaling. Not emails, not reports, just pages about my life. What I remembered, what I wanted to forget, what I was still trying to understand. I wrote about childhood birthdays, about feeling invisible, about making myself smaller to fit into other people's comfort zones. And then, I started writing about who I was becoming. Not the boy needing applause from a living room that never clapped, but a man who could stand in his own light without waiting for permission. The people in my life now aren't blood. There's Malik, who taught me how to grill without burning the salmon. Rachel, who brings me soup when I'm sick. May, my coworker who invites me to her family's Lunar New Year party every year and always saves me a seat. And every time they show up, without obligation, without guilt, I realize something. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who stays. 6 months after the wedding, my phone rang. Mom, I answered without hesitation. She talked about her garden, about retiring, about how Evan's wife was teaching her how to crochet. Then, after a pause, she said, I found the photo album. I smiled. Yeah, it was beautiful. Another pause. I'm sorry we didn't put you on the list. I waited. I didn't stop it. I should have. I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't, but I did say, thank you for telling me. And that was enough. This morning, I passed a kid crying on a park bench. I sat down, offered him a juice box, and asked what was wrong. Everyone went to Skylar's party and I wasn't invited. He sniffled. I smiled, pulled out a napkin, and folded it into a silly hat. Then we'll have our own party, I said. Just us two. Because someone once did that for me. Because sometimes, the best way to heal isn't to forget, but to pass the good parts forward. I've started making a new kind of list, not a guest list, not a who didn't call me list. A list of the moments that remind me who I am. Dancing in the kitchen with Mom at 7, flying home just to try reading that letter in a dusty storage unit, saying yes to myself when no one else would, and every time I write something down, I whisper the truth that took me decades to learn. I was always enough. Even when they didn't see it. When I first left Chicago, I thought I was only carrying 2 suitcases, but now I know I brought so much more. The need to overachieve to prove I mattered, the urge to explain myself when silence was louder, the ache for validation from people who stopped clapping years ago. I carried those things through promotions, new apartments, first dates, and lonely mornings, and I never unpacked them until now. For my 35th, I didn't wait to be celebrated. I rented out a rooftop space overlooking the harbor, ordered my favorite food, Invited friends, my chosen family, there was no drama. No subtle digs. No tension, just laughter, jazz in the background, and a cake with way too much frosting. Malik toasted to the friend who never asks for the spotlight but damn well deserves it. And I let myself believe it. That night, I didn't feel like the forgotten middle child or the odd one out. I felt seen, and more importantly, I saw myself. I thought about throwing away that old framed science fair certificate. It still had tape residue on the back, from when Dad pulled it off the wall, but something stopped me, because it wasn't about the third place. It wasn't even about science. The IT was about a moment where someone told me I mattered, without conditions. I hung it in my Boston apartment, right beside my Vertex Leadership Award, not as a comparison, but as a timeline. A quiet reminder that even back then, I was building something real.